Let's paint the scene. It's 2008 Hollywood, Los Angeles. The biggest stars aren't just from film, they're from television. And more specifically, reality TV. Nicole Richie, Kim Kardashian, the OG influencers. You didn't need talent to be famous, you just needed money, lots of money. Mansions, cars, designer brands, it was all accessible to Hollywood's elite. And their glamorous lives played out on TV week to week. But it wasn't just the era of the reality star, it was the age of the celebrity gossip site and the rise of social media. The public was welcomed into the lives of celebrities with access unlike ever before. Reality shows were filmed in their houses, MTV Cribs invited cameras right through the front door. And celebrities used social media to show their lavish lifestyles and were ruthlessly followed by paparazzi and gossip sites like Perez Hilton and TMZ. And in Calabasas, an affluent suburb that would become reality TV famous thanks to the Kardashians, there was Rachel Lee, a middle-class Korean-American teenager who found herself desperate to fit in. Desperate for a place among the richer, designer-wearing, credit card-flashing echelons of Hollywood society. Her desperation led her on a downward spiral of drugs, partying, and theft. After being expelled from Calabasas High, she met Nick Prugo, who was experiencing his own confusion in the chaos of adolescence. A friendship began, and so too did the infamous origins of what would become known as the Bling Ring. Their crime spree started small-scale, checking for unlocked car doors and stealing whatever valuables they could find inside. Then they set their sights on something much bigger, burglarizing houses. A friend of Nick's posted on social media that he was going out of town for a vacation. When he came back, his house had been burgled. When Nick discovered a website that showed every celebrity's address, their trajectory shifted. In 2008, he and Rachel robbed Paris Hilton, one of the biggest reality stars of all time. Did they break through a window? Sneak in a back door? No. They walked up to the front, checked under the mat, and found a key. Stepping into a world of excessive wealth, their adrenaline pumping, they stole what they wanted and then left, basking in the euphoria of what they'd done. And then they did it again and again, taking items that they didn't think would be missed, money, bags, jewelry, clothes. Paris was rich, she wouldn't notice, right? Targeting other celebrities, they used the internet to find their address, Google Earth to map their best way in, and social media posts to find when the celebrities would be away from their homes. In early 2009, they burglarized the home of Adrena Patridge, a reality star from the show The Hills. She just returned from a shopping trip and had left her back door unlocked. In her own words, they went shopping in her closet. The Bling Ring grew. Courtney Ames and Diana Tomeo, friends of Lee's, wanted in, and with them came Roy Lopez and Johnny Ajar. Ames and Lopez knew each other through their restaurant job, and Ajar was brought in to help them sell off stolen items. And then there was Alexis Nyers, a model and daughter of Michael Nyers, who had been a director of photography on shows like Friends and Spin City. Unlike others, she'd grown up around the glamorous Hollywood life. But like the others, she was young, used drugs, and liked to party in LA's hottest clubs. She and Nick became friends, and in July 2009, she joined the Bling Ring to burglarize Orlando Bloom's home. In a twist that could only happen in Hollywood, Alexis's downfall would be filmed by the cameras of ETV for the first season of her family's new reality show, Pretty Wild. It would be the only season they would get. After Adrena Patridge's home was burgled, she shared security footage with celebrity gossip site TMZ. The footage wasn't enough to make any arrests, but it was enough to scare Rachel into running away to her father's home in Las Vegas. But she didn't run for long. The Bling Ring wanted to pull their biggest job yet, and Rachel couldn't resist missing out. In 2009, they burglarized Lindsay Lohan's home. Lohan wasn't only a famous and sought-after actress in the 2000s. She was a regular on gossip sites who followed her wild, partying ways. So when the surveillance footage from the burglary of her house went viral, the jig was up. If the Bling Ring wanted fame, they'd achieved it. It was a story made in Hollywood, so naturally, it was turned into a film.
Hi, we're Molly, Kelly, and Bronwyn, and welcome to This Might Be True, the podcast that separates truth from film fiction. Today we're discussing the true story of the Bling Ring and the Sofia Coppola film based on it.
So, Molly, tell us about the film and how it came to be.
Sofia Coppola wrote and directed the film. If you're not familiar, Sofia is the daughter of one of the leading figures of New Hollywood in the 1970s, Francis Ford Coppola. She is what we call a Nepo baby, who literally grew up on the sets, appearing in the background of her father's films. So if we are familiar with the Godfather series, we might know that Sofia actually had a role in the third one, the worst one of the series.
Yeah, the worst. Oh, for sure the worst. Watch the first two, skip the third.
Sofia had been in other films. I think even as like a baby, she had appeared in the background of some other films. I know his movie Rumblefish that he made in the 80s after The Outsiders. She also had a small role in that. So he had kind of already been putting her in his movies, but this was like an actual dramatic role that critics did not like her performance. It was brutally panned, and she said that it didn't really bother her because she never really wanted an acting career. So it seems like, I guess her dad was kind of pushing her in that direction. And then she decided it wasn't really what she wanted to do. So she then kind of dabbled in fashion. I know she did an internship with Chanel. So she's had kind of a, self-discovery of what her artistic, inklings were going to be best put towards. Apparently, eventually, she made a black and white short on 16 millimeter, and it was about a bunch of 7th grade girls, a little clique. And then she adapted later after that a book by Jeffrey Eugenides called The Virgin Suicides, and that came out in 1999.
One of the best film adaptations of a book, like in terms of like feeling fully gratified.
And I mean, adaptations are kind of a Coppola thing. Her dad had done 2 different adaptations, both of S.E. Hinton novels. So I mentioned The Outsiders and also Rumblefish. It seems like Sofia is drawn towards adaptations and also just like stories about teenagers. And yeah, Francis, at least back in the 80s, that was very true of his films as well.
Why this film for Sofia?
Well, apparently she was on a flight in 2010, when she read the Vanity Fair article, The Suspects Wore Louboutins, written by Nancy Jo Sales. And that is really the basis of her screenplay. Again, she's already worked in adaptations. She did The Virgin Suicides. She's also worked in historical dramas like Marie Antoinette. So this does seem like a good suit for her, a good fit. Although, like I said, also, she seems to be intrigued by, especially the kids, as she likes to call them in interviews about this film. So she said, although she had heard the story on the news, she hadn't paid much attention to it. And she said that when she saw the story in the Vanity Fair and she saw the quotes from the kids, it sounded like it had the elements for a, quote, fun pop movie.
Iconic article. And honestly, if you guys haven't read it, just stop right now. Go and read it. It's online and it is worth it.
Yeah, this is very much the source material here that we're talking about.
Okay, so we've got this Nancy Jo Sales article. We've got these kids. They're kids. In the LA area, we've got in Calabasas, and there's this divide, right? The hills. There's like one side you've got the affluent celebrities, the iconic Hollywood scene, and the other side you've just got people living their lives. Hollywood is not just celebrities, it's a lot of people just living their lives. And then you've got teenagers who want more, and you get this situation where you've got Rachel Lee in Calabasas wanting to emulate what she sees on TV. This is the age of reality television.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like really important that we make a picture of this world, 2000s, the celebrity gossip site, and Bronwyn, you've done some research on that, and I think that could be a good moment to really just paint a picture of what is going on right now in the 2000s. What does society look like?
Well, and in terms of like the specific context that we're looking at in terms of timelines leading up to this, so the film itself was released in 2013, but the actual robberies took place in 2008, 2009. We've got The OC that premiered in 2003, and then it was a year after that Laguna Beach in 2004 premiered, and then we have TMZ launching 2005, Twitter first launched 2006, and then in terms of some of that like fixation on the world of Orange County, Calabasas versus Hollywood, The Real Housewives of Orange County premiered. That was the first ever Real Housewives franchise in Orange County, and that was 2006. The Hills show that was obviously the offshoot of Laguna Beach, that was 2006 also, and then the Kardashians started. The victims of the Bling Ring robberies, Kim Kardashian was not one of them, and I think that was still because she was very much in like the shadow. Paris Hilton was the star.
Paris,
But perhaps also because she was at the time living in a house with like 6 other people.
The world was really television focused. Like you got your celebrity news through E and through the celebrity gossip sites.
Yeah, and that was like the first time that we actually had any kind of like close to being live, quote unquote, reporting. It's hard to sort of like pinpoint what the main influence for the Bling Ring is because everything is interconnected. Like you can look at the celebrity blogs, but the celebrity blogs are dependent on the paparazzi. And then you can look at the paparazzi and then that is dependent on publications in terms of like old school tabloids. But then you have social media as a factor and you had stars who were cultivating paparazzi like attention themselves. I mean, that's how the perpetrators of this robbery were able to know where people were. Like
It's
it
surreal to
seems
think.
almost old school how there was like no sense of like, maybe I shouldn't live update where I am right this second.
Today, it's like they get on Instagram, they get on whatever app they want to use, TikTok, whatnot. Whereas back in the day, they didn't do that. Their voices were not, they didn't have that autonomy as much as they would today with their public figure. It was really based upon how they were perceived through their, let's say, reality TV shows or through tabloid and celebrity gossip. So they felt probably, at least to how I remember it, they felt very distant. They weren't something you could get close to. I feel like that's disappeared quite a bit with the way social media runs now. But back then it was like Paris Hilton was like on another planet and it was a planet of wealth, you know? Okay, so we have this society where we have, it's not that different from the hero celebrity worship of today, but it's a little different in the way that we're getting the information. We've got these kids and they're disenchanted and they feel that they feel like they at least are worthy of the things that they want. Now, you know, you and I, we might have had the same wants at that age, but we probably were like, we're not going to get it, so we'll just carry on living our lives. They didn't. You know, they made the choice to, you know, cross a line and actually start burglarizing these homes, which is it's an insane thing if you really think about it. I mean, the risk is extreme.
The guts to do it too, and to think that you wouldn't get caught.
We should clarify that it's difficult to go back and forth from talking about the real events in the film because Sofia did change the names of the characters, I guess because they were still underage at the time, some of the kids involved in this, or to somehow protect, I think she said for notoriety also, she didn't want to like blow them up.
Yes, she said, I didn't want to make those kids more famous than they already are for what they did. That was her reasoning for it. And Sofia also said, I always love stories about teenagers getting into trouble. And this one seems so absurd.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I think you were getting at there.
If it had just been Nick and Rachel, if they just kept it small and were just going in and taking like one bag and one dress, like how they started at Paris's, they might have kind of just been able to do it and get away with it. Like,
and she didn't notice. That's the surreal thing.
Yeah.
They went multiple times to Paris's house and they were stealing just sort of crumpled up cash out of the bags. And you know, it's kind of hard to imagine, but I suppose if you are surrounded by so much wealth and so many material things, you might not get, unless it's a favorite thing or something you're particularly in need of that moment, you aren't going to notice. And so the way that they got comfortable doing that and going into her house and taking those things, but then you get another person in, you get, you know, these people that worked at the restaurant. So you got Courtney Ames, right?
And then you've got Diana Tomeo. So they were friends of Rachel's. And they, and it's because they would brag about this. It wasn't like they would do it and then be like, oh, don't tell anyone. They'd be like, oh, yeah, I got this from Paris's closet, and we were at Paris's house. And so others were like, well, hang on. I kind of want in on that. That sounds fun. And then with them, you get Roy Lopez and Johnny Ajar. Lopez and Ames worked at a restaurant. And I just think that's so fascinating to me because you've got a restaurant job is your kind of standard job you're going to get when you're young, and you're trying to make some money. The fact that they meet in this restaurant job, where you've got Rachel Lee, who's already been stealing from Paris for a while with Nick, and they've probably accumulated quite a bit of, not wealth, because it's not easy to move these products. So they're stealing them, but it's not, they've got these items, and that's where Ajar comes in, right? They brought in Johnny Ajar to try and move some of these products that they were stealing, which didn't go so well. Because it's like
probably
he
a
wasn't
bad idea.
He wasn't exactly the most
and then
knowledgeable.
Right? Like they could have kept it quiet. They could have kept it small. They probably could have got away with it. And then we wouldn't have this film because we needed them to get sloppy and get caught. Because essentially it was the robbery of Lindsay's where they got caught on they'd been caught on camera before.
Being caught at Adrina's place.
Yeah.
So Nick and Rachel robbed Adrina's place. So Adrina was famous for, she was in The Hills, which is, a reality show.
Yeah. So The Hills was ongoing at the same time as these robberies. Adrina was famous for being on The Hills. They were all essentially like partying with, like had risen to the level of being celebrities.
You got reality famous. You could be, be from a completely different category of just regular human, get cast into a reality show, and that would then propel you to the same sort of level. So you're being talked about in the same circles as Paris Hilton and these other celebrities. So that was kind of it. Like, that was the influence. They were influencers, these reality stars. They're what we would consider today.
Well, yeah, I know exactly. And then that's what's sort of like the funny context for this film even, right? Because it's like you have people that are famous for being famous. You have people that are nobodies that are famous. Then you have these essentially the perpetrators of the robbery themselves, nobodies, who then became famous because of the robberies. So then in terms of Sofia, it's like, okay, so now you have to cast this with people that are going to be actors playing nobodies who want to be famous, who are now like, so that is so interesting too, in terms of like, who do you put together for this to play these people? And like, essentially you want people that are also hopefully young enough to come across as still being kids, quote unquote, as Sofia kept calling them.
And I wanted to say, because Molly, I would love for you to sort of take us, into the world of the film and how it was cast and everything. And I just, for 1 second before we do that, I just wanted to say, like, the general consensus of the time was not, my God, these poor celebrities, they've been robbed. It was very much an entertaining thing. Like you mentioned, Bronwyn, you've got these like nobodies that then themselves became famous because they'd robbed these celebrities. And it was like, watching it was like watching the strangest reality show you'd ever seen, but it was so fascinating. And so now we've got Sofia Coppola being like, hey, this would make a great film.
And then she's a celebrity herself, kind of like judging these wannabe celebrity kids. I love that she always calls them kids in these interviews too. And I'm like, they are almost adults, like when this occurred. And yet she's like, oh, these kids. Like she does kind of infantilize them or kind of mock them a little bit. That kind of is the tone I get in some of her interviews, in that she did find it kind of entertaining, like you said, instead of, this is so sad. She was like, this is hilarious. This whole situation is bonkers. That's why she wanted to do it. And yes, being a Nepo baby, her dad with his company American Zoetrope did executive produce. And then her brother Roman Coppola, who you might know works really, really closely with Wes Anderson. He also was a producer. And this was distributed by A24. It was a very brief script. It was like 80 pages, and it follows the sales article quite closely. For example, it does kind of start in Medias Res, in the middle kind of the burglary, similar to her article. And Sales was also a consultant on the film.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm not sure how strict they were with these consultant titles, but
I feel like you just throw a credit and pay them something, and you're like, thank you, please don't sue us. And like, that's, I don't know.
She hired, apparently Alexis Nyers as well did serve as a consultant. I read that she at least had a couple talks or conversations with her. I'm not sure again how formal these really were. And then she did also approach Nick, and apparently they had several lunches. But his attorney advised him against taking the formal gig of a consultant, so he didn't get like an official credit. But it does sound like she did spend some time talking to as many folks as she could. She said, "We talked to the boy, and he told me that one of the girls wanted to steal Paris's dog. So we put that in the movie. I could have never thought up details like that," is what she said of the script.
Stealing a dog. It's horrific.
But I love, that's what you love as like a screenwriter, right? Is these details that you're like, I could not make that up.
I could not make that up, but I'm going to put it in there.
Yeah.
And I like that his lawyer's like, don't get involved. And then he's still having lunches and telling her stuff.
But we do know with Nick couldn't help himself if he tried. I mean, the guy was calling paparazzi on himself, and he admitted to that on one of the documentaries I was watching. It might be the one on Netflix, The Real Bling Ring or whatever. But okay, who played who though? Let's get into that.
I was gonna say we can start with him, because he said I think it's the Netflix doc, that he was not happy with the casting of Israel Broussard, and apparently I think in the Netflix doc it's where he says he wanted a younger Tom Cruise he thought would be a better casting. So I guess he thought he was like not hot enough is what that kind of reveals. So Nick didn't like that it wasn't a big name that was playing him, nor was it a super attractive Hollywood guy. But yes, he was kind of relatively green. A lot of the kind of, besides Emma Watson, who we can get to in a minute, were relatively unknown. And yeah, so Nick was renamed Mark Hall.
Like these kids themselves were kids, they were unknown. Like, it makes sense in terms of casting.
As we said, they renamed everyone, which does make it kind of confusing sometimes. So like Nick is Mark in the movie, and he seems like quite confident. I wonder if part of the characterization of Mark is like partly from the actor, like his personality coming through, because he talks a lot in the interview I was reading with the actor that he was like, I was a loser in elementary school. I didn't have a lot of friends. I built up the character from like the kind of this insecurities. But I think maybe Nick is more insecure than he's willing to admit in these interviews since the fact. Yeah, right afterwards.
Nick and Rachel were seen as really very much the original of the Bling Ring, and it was very much them starting this. And whereas in the film, Mark feels a bit more like he's just kind of following the girls. I'd love to talk about Alexis and what Sofia chose to do with the character based off of Alexis.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because I would say Mark gets a bit more of a sympathetic maybe characterization that is supposed to be kind of a foil or contrast to how Alexis is in the film. So yes, we should get to her because she is played by the most well-known actor in the movie, which is Emma Watson. And this was her just finishing the last Harry Potter film. And then she had also done The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So this was kind of like a new role for her. And yeah, apparently Watson loved Sophia's work. And then she met with her and her unofficial casting director. And then she said she was working on a project with young people in it. So she read the script and got apparently obsessed. She apparently even like dressed up as Alexis for one of the auditions. She bought hoop earrings and like a crazy hat that's similar to the one Alexis wears when she goes to see her lawyer. She put on tons of bronzer. She put on a fake tan. She said, I just went full out and had the best time doing it because it's really the first time I've gotten to play someone who's a real character, someone just so different from me.
You know, we can list all the burglaries and we can look at like Paris multiple times, Adrena Patridge. I mean, that's Nick, that's Rachel. But the only one we know for sure that Alexis did was Orlando Bloom. She says that's the only one she took part in. Nick kind of makes it sound like that's not entirely true, but that's the only one she was ever... That was the only one she was charged with, as far as I'm aware. And so it's interesting, like, why do you think that Sofia chose to make Alexis really the main? She made her the Rachel Lee character, if you will, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wonder if it was just the visibility, like that she'd already given. I mean, I am so grateful to E for filming that first season. It is iconic. And it's like, of course it didn't go anywhere. Like, that was all you needed was like that season of that moment being documented. I think Sophia was like, this is here. It's on a platter for me. It's so perfect. Like, how can I not?
Well, it seems like Sophia was drawn to Alexis out of it. Like, she said, I did meet with her, and she admitted that her side of the story is very different than what she shows in the film. But I think she was drawn to Alexis because she said when they were doing the press and finally getting the celebrity status they craved, they were a little bit delusional about why it was happening. Alexis wouldn't talk about the robbery. She seemed to think they were interviewing her because of her style or something. And I think Sophia liked that moment of like, because again, the interview, especially at the end when she's talking to the press, right? Alexis, where they all gather around her, or sorry, Nikki is what she's called in the movie. So I think that was what Sophia liked about it, I guess. I guess she saw Alexis as one of the more interesting and kind of...
Well, and Rachel was really like not... She was trying to like move on and not have this be her whole life. Like there was that recent... It wasn't Netflix. I think it was HBO that did it. And that was actually interesting to see in terms of like to have her speaking about it herself. And then also because her dad was in it to talk about kind of like him trying to be like, I was trying to help her. Like we were kind of aware of what was going on. And that like last robbery of him being like, please don't go. And again, the like frontal lobe development issues of being 16 and being like, whatever, dad. So yeah, but I appreciate that from Sophia's point of view. It's not like Rachel was taking meetings. It's not like Rachel was telling her whole, like, you're going to be like, I don't really know what to do with this character because I can't get that information from her. Whereas, like, there was so much, like, content of Alexis and then her, sound bites and all that you'd be like, oh, we can't. This is just too good.
It's interesting when you think about it because of the people you've got. So you've got Rachel who she did just disappear. I mean, she literally left after the Audrina thing. Audrina released the footage of the robbery on her own website, but it wasn't until the Lindsay Lohan footage got released that police were like, oh, we can put these together. But so Rachel, after the Audrina robbery, she went to Las Vegas to stay with her dad. She came back because they were going to go for Lindsay Lohan, which was like, at that time, it was like Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton. And not only were they famous, celebrities, but they were also constantly in celebrity gossip sites for their own DUIs and criminal, like they had their own court cases going on. They had a lot going on themselves in their own personal lives. And so the fact that she came back and that's what got her caught as well. It's interesting because then she just really kept quiet. I don't think I've ever seen any interview with Diana and Roy and is it Ajax? I'm forgetting their names now. And that's the fact that I can't even like pull their names as quickly because they seem so secondary. And then you've got Nick and Alexis, and they become the two faces of this.
Well, and Alexis, to be fair to her, or I guess to be fair to like Sophia, she was arrested for the Bling Ring, served, was released, and within that same year was arrested again for heroin and was back. So it's like, and now she's done her whole, like, I'm sober, I'm changed, I'm doing all this media to talk about how I had this horrible childhood and got into drugs, and, like, now I'm a different person. So it's like, she, besides the Bling Ring, I think she was, before and after, was on some sort of trajectory to be in the limelight, like, regardless, right?
She was her mother. I think it was quite clear, and I think her mother did speak up in the documentary about her own narcissism and her own. She wanted to really push her into this. The momager thing that we've seen. I mean, you wouldn't have the Kardashians if you didn't have Chris behind it all, right? Like, so it works sometimes, but in that time it didn't, and they
were like bankrupt. Her family, like her
that's
dad
right.
left. He was like an alcoholic. He worked on Friends as director of photography, and then his career like completely fell apart. I mean, to be fair to her mom versus Kris Jenner, maybe Kris Jenner had less of a legitimate reason to be pushing her kids in front of the limelight.
It's a bit chilling when you like in the document, it was the documentary thing where she was like, well, I was doing it at that age. And you're thinking these girls are being put in hypersexualized positions at such a young age where they are absolutely going to be in rooms with predators, and they do not have the intuition at that age to know how to protect themselves, and they had no one like there to protect them. It's and you could see in Alexis in her own interviews later to talk about that. It's we laugh and we're like, oh, the Bling Ring, and but there were real people at this. There were real victims, you know, the celebrities themselves, and there were real people that, you know, the perpetrators themselves. You know, it's, you don't just go and rob a house for fun. It's not your regular run-of-the-mill thing.
And I feel like Sophia, like, I don't know, it sort of says a lot that as much as I feel like the thing that you're constantly doing with this story is being like, no, but I do feel bad for Paris, and I do feel bad for Rachel Like, Rachel Bilson moved. She was so traumatized. Audrina Patridge called her sister from her closet and was like, if I open this jewelry box and it's empty, I've been robbed and there's somebody probably still in my fucking house. Like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And then was like, get someone to call the police while I like lock myself in because I could be murdered, like, you know. But I feel like it says a lot that Sophia was like, my story is going to be about the children that did. She was not like, and here's my movie about Rachel Bilson and how hard this was for Paris Hilton. Like, she knew that that wasn't really the story. You're not watching that movie being like, this was like really hard for those. Like, I think we were talking, Molly, about the houses, because wasn't it Audrina's house? And in the movie, it's this like glass box.
Yes, they gave her an upgrade in the movie.
No, and even that, Sophia's like, whatever. Who cares what the real house looked like?
Because Audrina's house was on a hill, wasn't it? And there was like, they got in through an alleyway next door, like a little gate area, and that's how they got in. And they just, when you look at the footage of Audrina's, the footage she put up, it's not some glamorous Hollywood-esque backyard. I mean, I'm sure it was a very lovely home, you know, from most standards, but it wasn't the glass, beautiful structure that they shot in the film.
Yes. Yeah. Apparently, at the time, Audrina was in a Spanish-style Hollywood Hills home that cost about $1.15 million. And yes, the home in the movie is far more expensive. It's this glass-walled, ultra-modern abode perched atop of hill with an expansive view of the city's glittering lights. And apparently the location scout was like, well, she's the poorest of the bunch. She's never going to have this house. But apparently it wasn't so much Sophia. It was the cinematographer that loved the way that we could see the kids break into it from afar. He said, it makes them look like rats trapped in this glass home.
Ooh, I like that. It's so true. And you're just watching it, and you're not watching it like, stop, that's not yours. You're like, get out. Get out before they catch you. It's
get away with it. Yeah.
Forces you to kind of sit there and question your own ethics for a second, you know? And it's a beautiful shot. It really is. It sticks in your mind, that one.
And like the webcam, we have it's like a long take, and then it also slowly zooms in. And apparently, again, Sophia even considered cutting that shot. And then the cinematographer convinced her not to. I can't imagine it without it. Yeah, and the cinematographer did pass away in post-production from brain cancer, which is pretty sad. I mean, I'm glad that he was a part of it, because I think a lot of reviews, a lot of critics, like, that's the shot that they all write about.
And it's just so interesting that that's Audrina's house, but it's not her house, you know. And the things, the changes that Sophia made throughout the film like that, like we've obviously mentioned how Alexis just got really up to character. And not only was she like put as the ringleader, I mean, they throw that word around with Rachel Lee all the time, the ringleader. She was seen as like the ringleader. She was cast with the most famous, the only famous cast member.
There were bigger people that were cameos. Like
That's true.
Right?
Yes, we do see Kirsten Dunst in the club. Yeah.
Was she just visiting or something?
She was. She was not planned to be in the movie. She was visiting Sophia, her buddy, on set, and then they kind of just threw her in there. But there is a cameo of Paris, and that was planned. Yeah, that was like the planned one.
That's what's, I think, so fascinating about, you know, the celebrity of it all. You've got a celebrity filmmaker. You've got Emma Watson. You've got, you know, the kids themselves, as she calls them. You know, they've become these celebrities of a moment. They're 15 minutes of fame. And then you've got the victims. And, you know, and it's like you said, Bronwyn, you want to mention that they are victims. Like, yeah, they're wealthy, they're famous, but someone comes into your home and you feel completely terrified. I think was it her or Rachel Bilson? They took like her grandmother's jewelry. And, you know, there are these things that are like irreplaceable. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. And it's just the violation of having somebody in your home is terrifying. But it is very strange to think about how Paris, they just went to the front door and found a key under, I mean, like, Paris Hilton, Like, it's just surreal. Like, she's just like us, celebrities. They put the key under the mat. But it's interesting because Paris didn't move, did she? All the others,
no.
they moved.
They filmed in the same. Sophia was like, "Could we show up and film in the room that they pilfered?" And she's like, "For sure."
Let's talk a little bit about things that I think Sophia is really known for. Soundtrack.
Yes.
And then let's also talk about like the style, the clothing, the fashion.
Yes.
Well, because as we were saying, it was like you're surveilling these people. You have this access. You're either watching the OC and shopping, or watching Laguna Beach and shopping, or watching Paris's many outfits on Pink is the New Blog or Perez Hilton. You're like, you can actually go and access these closets.
Well, and we should also mention, like, in terms of the style, we do actually film in Paris Hilton's home. Like, we go into the home with Rebecca and Mark, and that is actually her house. And it is kind of in Coppola's style to use actual locations because she had just done Marie Antoinette, which was, of course, at Versailles. She got special permission for them to like close once a week so she could do all of the stuff at Versailles. So this was kind of in her style to be like, let's go there. And like all the locations we also see of them like driving around, like we are in the location of where the events were set. And that does make it kind of look and feel very almost, I guess, documentary-like at times because, yes, we are actually where they were. We get to see what it was like to drive around the hills and kind of, imagine going into those houses. Then we go inside those and then we actually see, I think, the pillows that she has that are like the pictures of her face.
Yeah.
Like,
as I was watching it, I was like, imagine having pictures of your face.
Yeah.
Imagine if this pillow was just my face. No questions asked.
It seems kind of like superfluous to have created, so I'm guessing she probably actually has them. Because why add it? I think she would maybe even be offended if they had added it, right?
Yeah. One word only. Paris.
But yeah, we can definitely also talk like the costumes, right, are very worth noting, especially again because Sophia has this background working in fashion, working for Chanel. She was also very close friends with the Louis Vuitton designer at the time. And also apparently the way the costume designer went about doing it, she said they went through back issues of US Weekly, and just being in LA, they would walk down the Boulevard, Robertson Boulevard. They would go to the Ivy. They would go to Hyde Lounge and like just look at what people were wearing. And then, of course, with Miranda Kerr's closet, they did try to get as much of the actual stuff that she wore on the red carpet from that time so that when they were going through it, like it does, like those are the clothes that would have been hanging. So they did try to do that very like authentically.
Was she Victoria's Secret at the time? And if Miranda was dating Orlando Bloom, so it was Orlando Bloom's home that got robbed.
Yes,
and they were dating at the time, and so she had
it was her closet or her
closet,
clothes.
And then his Rolexes. He had a collection of Rolex. I believe he bought himself one for every film he did. And there is I don't remember if it's Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel. I'm not sure what, but you've got to go onto YouTube and find it where he talks about how he got.
Yes, we watched
some of his watches back from a pawn shop. Like, it is incredible. You've got to find it. It's such a great story of Orlando Bloom just going in like, I'm going to get these back.
And I can't imagine that they, like, if they tried to get the stuff from Miranda Kerr's wardrobe, sure. I can't imagine that they sourced the actual, like, they apparently were so rare, these Rolexes, that was, like, one of the stupid things that they took. Because, like, how do you get rid of it? No. It's like having a piece of art, like a stolen Picasso, and you're like, now to sell this on eBay. Like, no, you can't. What? No, like it's so traceable. I can't imagine that they sourced the actual, like they apparently were so rare, these Rolexes, that was like one of the stupid things that they took. Because like, how do you get rid of it? It's like having a piece of art, like a stolen Picasso, and you're like, now to sell this on eBay. Like, no, you can't. What? No, like it's so traceable.
And I believe they sold them for like 5,000. I mean, these watches.
He says in the movie, he's like, aren't they worth a lot more? And the guy's looking at him like, no shit, they are.
The sort of like levels of friend dynamic and like social dynamic and like class dynamic that was going on within this Bling Ring group says a lot. That you're like, don't you have like a friend of a friend that knows some that like is in like
have
the criminal
prior
world?
Arrests and had their own, so like maybe had dabbled in some kind of other criminal activity.
Yeah.
But they're like, that does not equate that you are a criminal mastermind who then now knows how to move these, Rolex watches.
Rare watches. Yeah.
Rolex watches.
Oh, yeah. And the bags were also like, there was a camouflage Louis Vuitton bag that they stole from Paris Hilton. And they got that for the movie. Apparently they used it, according to the costume designer, a million times they used it. And they also made up like a list for the prop people of all the it bags of the past 5 years or so for them to obtain. And some of them were on loan because obviously it was really expensive. So they got them loaned out to the production. Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, Rebecca takes a Birkin. I think that might be the first robbery that they did.
Yeah.
That's
but
the
I'm like,
robbery
that's a
that they did
pricey bag.
Because that's the thing.
Nick's friend.
Nick's friend. That was like one of the first things they did was rob Nick's friend. His friend was away, put up a post saying he was going to Jamaica, I believe. And they went and robbed his family home and they stole, I think it was his mother's Birkin in the film, and the car. They took the car as well.
Yeah.
Which is just, and in the documentary, the Netflix documentary, they interviewed this guy and he says like they haven't had justice to this day. Like he's still like, oof, he's holding, I mean, the grudge is there, and fair enough, because they stole quite a bit from, his parents didn't believe in banks, and so they had kept all their money under the bed. So naturally, that was all gone, which is, very interesting in of itself. So, but that's that scene in the, one of the very early robberies that they do, and there's the Birkin, and a Birkin.
Yeah. I'm guessing that was not part of, you don't put that in your budget to go buy a Birkin. You're like, we can borrow a Birkin.
Okay, so in the cast, we've got some characters that are not, you had mentioned in your notes, Molly, that they do create a character that's some characters combined, right?
Yes. So Emily Moore, who is like Nikki's sister, so I guess, again, Alexis's sister in the movie, she's kind of an amalgamation of her actual sister, Gabby, and Diana Tomeo, who you mentioned earlier.
Yes, yeah.
Diana was apparently the one who was actually small enough to get in through the doggy door. But in the movie, we see Alexis's sister, or, well, Emily, as she's called, do it in the movie. So they kind of took that detail of the doggy door from Diana and added it to her sister. But from I could tell she's more of the sister. Like, she's kind of more based on Alexis's sister than Diana. It's just that one little detail.
Where they're like tops, like, oh, that looks cute. And that, and, like what to wear. And they have that little scene. And it's just the fashion of it is so important.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, just it's such a like moment of like, you're just dressing with your, sister or a friend. Like, that looks cute, try this one. And yet you're like, these are stolen items. This is someone else's clothing. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, what happened to the real Bling Ring members after the burglary? What happened with the trial? And how did that connect to Sofia's movie about the Bling Ring?
After the release of the surveillance footage from the robbery at Lindsay Lohan's home, Alexis Knives informed the police that Rachel Lee and Nick Prugo were responsible for the burglary. This was done via an anonymous phone call. Police then connected the burglaries of Adrena Patridge and Lindsay Lohan's homes, and Nick was arrested. On strange advice from his lawyer, Nick confessed to everything, even the burglaries the police hadn't connected him to, like Brian Austin Green and Megan Fox's home. And he named everyone. The Bling Ring members' homes were raided, and they were found in possession of stolen property. Their social media accounts were scoured, and images of stolen possessions showed up in their photos. The media hounded them, filming them after their arrests, on their way to court. Nick tipped off paparazzi, did news interviews, and the producers of Pretty Wild, realizing the reality TV gold they'd been handed, made Alexis's arrest the main focus of the show, even filming her arraignment. And Nancy Jo Sales interviewed her for a Vanity Fair article she was writing about the Bling Ring. Alexis's reaction to the unflattering article was immortalized in an episode of Pretty Wild. While Alexis and Nick had their moment in the spotlight, Rachel kept quiet. Even as the others pointed to her as the ringleader, stories conflicted, friends turned on each other, and among it all, lawyers and police wanted to get their 15 minutes of fame. When Sofia Coppola started filming The Bling Ring, she had help from none other than Brett Goodkin, the chief investigator of the case. Not only was he paid to consult on the movie, but he also had a cameo, arresting Emma Watson in one scene. Defense attorneys subpoenaed the payroll for Sofia Coppola's production company and found out that he was paid $12,500, which he had not disclosed to the LAPD or the DA. Due to this, he was not able to testify at trial, which resulted in reduced sentences for the members of the Bling Ring. In total, the Bling Ring stole around $3 million in cash and belongings from their victims. Rachel Lee was sentenced to 4 years in prison and served 1 year, 4 months. Nick Prugo was sentenced to 2 years, credited with time served. Diana Tomeo got 3 years probation and 60 days of community service. Courtney Ames got 3 years of probation and 2 months of community service. Johnny Ajar was sentenced to 3 years in jail due to former convictions. Roy Lopez was given 3 years probation, and Alexis Nyes was sentenced 180 days in county jail where she served 30 days, spending the last 5 in a cell next to none other than Lindsay Lohan, who was serving 90 days for reckless driving and DUI.
Wild.
Okay, so everyone wants to be famous.
Literally everybody. In terms of the Officer Brett Goodkin, he was the chief investigator in the case, and there was some very funny quotes that when I was trying to do research about this, about where it was him going back and forth with the department, and he was like, I totally asked for permission and they totally gave me permission, and the department said, like, they were like, no, we had no idea that he was going to be part of this. And this was because Sofia just sort of, I mean, as we've discussed, she was apparently throwing credits to everybody who wanted to be a consultant, and I guess met with this officer and was like, sure. And he didn't seem to have a concern about the fact that this was like an ongoing case and that it might not be appropriate for him to be part of it. But there was a great quote. He said, I wanted to see what Sofia was going to do with the story. It's interesting to see how things work in a factory town, and I'm certain I'll never work on a movie again. He said, look, it's not like I was chosen because I was Detective of the Year. We don't choose the cases we get. It's not like there's a character based on me. It's not like I'm Bruce Willis. And then he also said that the comment he made, just to like tie back to the fashion element, was Goodkin said that he was also struck by the stalkerish aspect of the crimes. Quote, it may be a stretch, but is wanting to wear somebody's clothes that different from wanting to wrap yourself up in their skin like that guy in The Silence of the Lambs?
Yes,
That's
it is.
very different. Yes. Officer Goodkin, very different.
Hey, Bronwyn, can I wear your shirt and your face?
Yeah. Same, Kelly. Same.
He's so fascinating to me because, I mean, like, this had real effects on the trap because he was supposed to be questioned as his role as chief investigator, and instead they were like, well, now your word means nothing. So now we're going to have to deal with this out of trial, and we're going to have to, like, basically give them almost the bare minimum. I mean, really, for what they stole, for what they did, most of them got probation, you know, and those that went to prison, obviously you've got Rachel went longer. But the Alexis Nyes being in the cell next to Lindsay Lohan is so wonderfully, like, meta. I mean, you've stolen from her. Alexis herself theoretically wasn't part of that burglary. She's only known for the Orlando Bloom one. But the fact that was the burglary that really threw it all up in the air and then got them caught. And then the fact that she's in the cell next to Lindsay, who's in there for her own, you know, DUI ongoing struggles that she was facing at the time. I mean, it's so Hollywood. You can't write it.
This is just like such a quintessential like Hollywood LA story.
It is a Hollywood story through and through. And then the things that really struck me is like, so you've got your chief investigator who is like completely ruining any chance of like proper justice being served just because he wants his moment of 50 minutes of fame. And then you have the lawyer for Nick Prugo who told him to go in and confess to everything. And I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think you're supposed to tell your client to confess to everything.
Even crimes they hadn't connected to them yet.
The Megan Fox, you know, Brian Austin Green, their home was burglarized. He told them all about that. And he named everyone. Because Alexis had made an anonymous phone call and then Nick found out about that. So then it was like they were turning on each other.
Yeah.
And then that's when Rachel's name got pulled into it. And then it was like the cops were just like, please don't stop talking. The lawyers, the police that were involved in the trial and in, the legal side of it all. And then you've got a film made about it. And then you've got, a celebrity director, Nepo, of a very kind of big Hollywood family of names. And then you've got cast members who are wanting their own careers, who are going to play these roles in hopes that they will get. It's just so interesting.
And I think going back to like the style of the film, this was a departure for her because she was trying to create this kind of mixed media newscape. Like she uses a lot of Facebook screenshots. She has like news clips. She does kind of try to create this almost paparazzi like news, a lot of quick cut. And I thought it was funny. I read this little quote from her because she apparently showed the movie to a friend's teenage daughter, and the daughter said, "Oh, it doesn't look pretty like your other work." It does still have like the overexposure. She loves her lens flares, a lot of close-ups with like shallow focus that gives you this kind of insular feeling like you are being swept away, just like Mark, into the excitement of this click that she's creating. But then also, there's like all this footage of them driving right through the San Fernando Valley that's very kind of like gray and white and kind of beige. It like almost doesn't really feel like her other work that way because it is so kind of monotoned in a way. And then of course they also have the club stuff, and that apparently they went to a lot of efforts to make the clubs look real. Like even that wasn't as kind of polished and glamorous as what, again, coming off of something like Marie Antoinette, right? That was a bit of a departure for Sophia.
Is the soundtrack. She has,
yeah, I was gonna say,
yes.
the club scene was so like, that was another like important like context of this, was like that there's I think it's in the movie, right? The clip of Audrina, and she's like on a red carpet being like, we all go to like Lady,
we go,
and
that's it.
And it's like there was only a few places. I mean, the Roosevelt was another one because they used to have that bar, the poolside bar, where I think Lindsay Lohan got kicked out of there, but it was like there was only a few places that all of these people were going to. And then, of course, you have the soundtrack of like what was playing in these clubs. And in the cars, too, because like LA is such a car culture, like driving music.
And the kids were all addicted, and they talked about their addiction struggles afterwards, and it was very much a part of, they were not doing this sober. They were high, they were making foolish choices, and just very disenchanted with life. I mean, it was very much, and it's hard. Like you feel for them at a point. You were like, it's hard to be young. It's hard to be confused about, like, if you're confused in the sense of Nick Prugo talking about his sexuality, and he was closeted still, and only was out to certain people he trusted, and so there's this sense of a very human experience. But it's just the choices they made and the lines that they crossed stop it from being something that you feel empathy for, and you start to kind of go, well, okay, this is where you go, oh, that I didn't do that, I experienced that, or I feel like I had friends who experienced this, but that, no, none of my friends were like, hey, let's go rob, like, the richest person's house on the street.
And I'm not like going to confess to anything here, but I did go to like
Allegedly.
we had fairly like some friends that were more affluent in terms of like, we grew up on the west side of Vancouver, and I was at a house party and they kicked everybody out, and it was an odd house party because the owner, like the girl's dad, was present and it was kind of condoning it, but then the cops were coming, so we all had to leave, and they were kicking us all out, and people were just grabbing shit off the shelves as they left.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like it
Just
was a nice
one person
house.
does it,
And yeah, and then everyone was like, "Oh,
mob
okay,
mentality,
like cool, like sure." And it was like literally like a decorative vase, and so it was like, yoink, I'm just gonna. So, and I remember after the fact, like at school, hearing that it was like, no, they had like shit taken, like this was the like there were things that were
house
of value
parties
that actually. I mean, like you
often
have a
ended that
house
way.
party, you're like opening yourself up to that anyways.
I had a friend whose computer, they had like a computer room, and someone took like an entire computer with them when the cops showed up, and they all just like, and the next morning she didn't even realize until the next morning was like, my computer's gone. That's great. Okay, so folks, if you have a film based on a real event that you'd like us to discuss in upcoming episodes, send us an email at thismightbetruepodcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the podcast, and if you feel so inclined, give us a 5-star review. You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at This Might Be True Podcast. And join us next time to find out what else might be true.